We are live. Let's go live with Jack Kelly and Mark Anthony Dyson. Hey,
Hey,
how are you, my friend?
I am good, and it was great seeing you last
Yes,
week. Or was it last week? It seems like so
it
long ago
blurs.
now.
Is it so funny when you see somebody in person that only like when you just see them on video and then you see them in real life? It's it's weird, right? It's so
It
it's
it
whoa,
it
this is
should
actually
be it should be the other way around, but
right.
we're from a different generation, so we might be aliens to
Yeah.
the young ones. I think.
So today we have a lot to talk about, right?
Yes, we do.
So do you want to talk about first
Talk about
lies?
what you want to talk about. You lead this thing. This is your
Okay.
show. It's not
How
our
about
show these
this?
days.
We could
Okay.
talk about, lies, or, I don't even want to say lies. I want to be polite, omissions.
Yeah, I'm not going to be polite. They're
Okay.
lies.
I'll be the
We,
polite guy.
we,
Yeah.
and when we did Job Seeker Nation,
Yeah.
I called them lies. I
Yeah.
said companies
Uh,
lie.
okay.
And there comes this study
Yeah.
this survey that, hey, 36% of hiring managers lied to job candidates. I said, oh, so that really wasn't the big news,
Yeah.
really, but it goes along that people are admitting that they do. And it's probably more, but we can
Yeah.
go
Now,
further with that.
now how like so they in this survey, are they recruiters or who participated in the survey that they found
Well,
out?
it was the way the article was positioned was that
Mhm.
over one third of hiring managers
Huh.
admit to lying to candidates. So it's the hiring managers, not specifically the recruiters,
Mm.
although we can lump them in. Maybe it's an alley-oop situation where the recruiter leads them to the
Right.
hiring manager knowing what they're going to say.
And if it's 36% admit it, how many people don't admit it, right? Because like I wouldn't admit it if I wouldn't lie, but if I did, I wouldn't say anything. I mean, this is crazy. So it has to
Mhm.
be probably twice as many people who either lie or fib a little bit or sins of omission
Right.
or
Right. And the justification is, well, candidates lie, so why can't we lie? But, you know, that's bad on you if you keep seeing bad candidates. That's not on them.
so what do you see? Like, what have you noticed in terms of on both sides of the equation? So let's say from the company side, have you seen like really glaring, you know, things where somebody lied about a job, about an opportunity, about growth, potential?
Well, when I was a hiring manager once upon a time, a
Mhm.
couple of decades ago, and after a few hundred candidates, there was an integral part between HR and the hiring manager. I don't know if that still exists now, but I guess it depends on who, what, where. And I don't know if this study was very specific, and I probably should have read it like a fifth time to see if there's specific industries that do. I don't think it was mentioned in
Yeah.
the article. I think it was more or less a generality. I bet you, and this might be bad on me for my bias in the sense of that maybe a lot of sales positions are involved in those kind of situations where you have to meet a
Yeah.
quota. There's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of pressure to perform. So the candidate may lie about his numbers or embellish his or her experience, and the company may lie or embellish their experiences with workers and how they actually work.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's a matter of everybody asking all the right questions. We can give a little forgiveness in the sense that there's a miscommunication or not understanding the full context of what each other mean. But I will say that HR tends to embellish or tends to play whack-a-mole. You should hit here, another issue will pop up somewhere else.
All right. I'll take the softer side a little bit. I
Okay.
think when you said pressure, I'm glad you brought up because that's like a really key word. I
Well,
think
that's a
perhaps,
real thing. People are
yeah.
pressured to
See,
perform,
that's
and
what it is.
they're pressured to get results.
See,
So,
exact, dude. See, this is where I think I think you're dead on with it because sometimes the pressure like makes everything fall like dominoes. For instance,
right.
if let's say it's a tight job market
Hmm.
and it's hard to find people, you have a manager who's yelling and screaming, I need help, I need more people. So they're going to put pressure on HR, they're going to put pressure on the internal talent acquisition people, they're going to put
Hmm.
pressure on the outside recruiters to get butts and seats. And then if the
Hmm.
pressure is intense to get butts and seats, people might cross the line. Now, like I really seriously, dude, don't think I'm like naive or I'm a babe in the
Right.
woods,
No,
but
no,
I
but your
I don't
perspective.
know if it's really like they're lying. And again, you might think I'm crazy by saying this. I don't know if they're definitely lying. I think they're just shading things. You know what I mean? Which you could say is a lie, maybe, but like, well, what do you mean by
Yeah.
what I mean by that is like they're not going to say, okay, we're going to pay you $250,000, and then all of a sudden you only get, 100,000, which is a
Right.
blatant lie. But it could be, hey, we have great growth potential. If you do really well, you have the opportunity to make $200,000. You
Or up
may
to 200.
may
Not
have the
thousand.
opportunity to get this bonus. You may
Yeah.
have the opportunity. So they're not, to me, lying. They're just they're not telling the truth. they're
Well,
not
yeah,
being very accurate. So
and
I
we're
don't. Are we
talking about
splitting hairs?
layer,
Yeah.
right? And there's different layers, so we don't
Mhm.
know. In some sets, and
Right.
I do know that, especially when talking about hiring
Right.
executives, things
Yeah,
are
because
pretty
like,
spelled out in the C-suite, right?
because like it gets
We're
complicated
looking at,
because
let's say we're not talking about non-executive position.
right.
It gets a whole lot more complicated, and then we're talking about how money is distributed and what the terms are and the timing and that whole thing. And, gets really complicated. So we're talking about perhaps everybody but executives, although I'm sure the people in the comments can
Yeah.
also correct us in that particular manner. We could say that there are, the middle management, the rank and file, we can call the rest of them
Mhm.
maybe, that potentially that you're saying you can get up to this amount. Now, up to could mean anywhere. It could be $100,000 difference between, you know, getting a result and then layered with incentives
Mhm.
to get a particular pay. For the person, they're looking at the bottom line with the number. But in this particular survey, it says that these hiring managers admit to lying.
Yeah.
So we're not splitting hairs here. They admit to lying. There, we could say there's probably more that lie but have justified their position as being, that, they alter, they change positions somewhat, or they shift thinking to where they're not lying. And I
Yeah.
understand the white lie thing, still lying, but we can get that. But they admit it. So
Yeah.
it's a bold face. They've come to
Yeah.
terms that they lie.
All right. Let me run a few things by you and see what
Okay,
is this
go
a
ahead.
lie or is this just business? Starting with the job description. In a lot of states now, you have to have a salary band. And
Hmm.
the salary band is so large, it's ridiculous to be like $50,000. And
50 to 250.
I'm not exaggerating, right?
Yeah, no.
$50,000 to like $500,000.
Yeah.
Now, a candidate who's looking for a job is going to see the 50 to like the 500, and they may say, I think I should get 300 or 400 and anchor themselves to that higher number. Now, some that could be appropriate, a lot won't. So, right from the get go, I don't know if these are lies or mission, but it is kind of not fair to the candidate because it sets their expectations, it level sets them to something that they're not going to get. And if they don't get that higher number, they're going to feel they were ripped off and cheated.
Then the candidate would need to ask the hiring manager
Mhm.
to layer out for them what tiers does the
Yes.
candidate meet for them to get the 500,000, the top salary. Now, if you say anything less than walking on water, there's going to be problem.
Yeah.
There's going to be a big problem because you can't justify and say, well, this is the tier. We say, well, I meet this tier, and then you offer them 200,000
Yeah.
less. That's where a problem
A-
is, and that's where
And that's when
the
people get
trust
angry. That's where they
breaks.
get
This is
really
where the
angry.
trust breaks, and it's pretty much an over for most people unless they're really desperate. But somebody who's not desperate are going to
Right.
only ask that question to see how far out you're going to get. Now, if they refuse to answer that question, that is even a bigger red flag.
That's a flag.
That means you just made that number up arbitrarily because you don't want to comply with the law. And therefore, I'm going to think there's something else wrong with you. And
All right.
that's just the truth.
Now, what about this? Is this a lie, not a lie, omission? When this is, people say this all the time, hiring managers, HR, external recruiters, internal recruiters. Hey, we offer, great benefits. We offer the ability to grow. You could fast track, there's going to be promotions, but it's not in writing. So they're just putting it out there. Could it be that you could have a fast track? Yeah. Could it be that you can make big fat bonuses? Yeah. But it's, you know what I mean? They're not putting it in
And the
writing.
candidate,
So
yeah. And if you hear all of that, once you hear something incredulous, you have to
mhm,
investigate and give yourself the time to make sure that these people actually exist.
right.
That who's been fast tracked and can I talk to that person? It, and you know they're going to tell you no, but you still want to ask the question anyway. Then you go to LinkedIn or you go through your connections or somehow at least to see it may be in the internetosphere that yes, these people lie about because I asked too. And then, I mean, there's a lot of ways to peel the fruit, but who has time to go on that kind of chase always, right? Because it's a matter of semantics to
Yeah.
one party, but it's somebody else's livelihood. So why fool with it?
All right. Is this a lie or not a lie? Let me run this one by Mark.
Okay.
So the boss is a toxic, narcissistic micromanager. Would it be a
Okay.
lie, or maybe a lie by omission, if a recruiter or somebody in the hiring process didn't advise the candidate that, hey, I want you to be aware that Jack and Mark, who are the managers, they're crazy. They're micromanagers. They're
Yeah.
narcissistic. They're bullies.
Right.
Would that be considered a lie by just not telling the truth about who they are? And what if also, I'll add to this, Mark, if there's a turnstile where this role has been open 2 or 3, 4 times over the last couple of years, so no one seems to stay. And if you don't bring that up, would that be considered a lie too?
Well, that deserves other questions when you hear something like
Okay.
that. You're talking about when that comes from the actual hiring managers. They're saying that Jack and Mark are part of my management team, and they're really rough on candidates. They're really rough on workers and new hires, and they're narcissistic and they're anal and they micromanage. Is that part of the success or is that part of the failure? And,
So what
you,
you're saying is
you
that if you're pushing people to do their best, like you're not being a jerk, it's just that you're like that hard-nosed football coach is that what you're saying? That's like pushing them to do their best.
well, that also
Yeah.
indicates what that hiring manager's
Yeah.
management style is
Yeah.
because he could be very well the one to drive them to that, which, if you're being that honest, you're telling all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might be a silver lining if you're the one to really put up with that. There's some people who don't care. And so maybe they want only people who don't care about having their feelings hurt and being
Yeah.
managed in that way. But most of us are not that way. So,
See,
you gotta you gotta parse those you gotta parse that some in order
see,
to get the straight answer.
this doesn't seem fair where a person, if you have a, let's say a mid to senior level white collar worker,
Hmm.
they'll be told to go on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 interviews over the course of like 6 months and get
Hmm.
ghosted, and you don't get feedback, you don't get constructive criticism. But yet you make that person do everything. Then oftentimes, and we can talk about this a little bit more in detail, ask
Yeah.
people to do work for free. Um, and and
Hmm.
that's okay. But why shouldn't it be part of like the job description where, and I'm being serious now because like, but this
Yeah.
is
Right.
because
Right.
people like aren't used to this, but wouldn't it make sense to say, hey, this job is open, but I want to let you know that we've had 3 people have the same job over the last 6 months, and there's a lot of turnover. And then get an
Hmm.
asterisk, here's why there was a turnover, so that people could go in and really judge for themselves. you know, um, I'm still going to go and interview because I'm hearing about those 3 people. Maybe I think I could do better, or just say I'm not going anywhere near this because this seems like a toxic situation where no one could
Hmm.
last. But wouldn't that just be fair in today's day and
Not
age,
all,
right?
you give people the chance to say no. In fact, you can weed out a lot of applicants
Mhm.
from even looking at the position any further
Right.
or trying to apply if you tell them, like somebody did on LinkedIn recently, particularly the past day or two, where they bragged about how they brought in 2 candidates and said, we want you to recruit for these positions. And it didn't say that they got paid for it, but they expected results within 4 days. And this was free work. But of course, it wasn't clear whether they did this up front. I imagine they didn't do this up front and they didn't pay them. Therefore, yeah, it's not only unfair, but it's misleading because you're saying you're using the language. I think say that people need to be able to articulate and communicate their abilities. And I'm like, well, and there we get into the biases aspect. And if you didn't read into that, I can get to
Yeah.
that too. But right now we'll deal with the fact that, yeah, telling people up front exactly what to expect is more than helpful. And there are organizations that actually tell you, if you go on their site and you search for it, they can tell you what to expect out of the position or what to expect out of the interview process, which is another reason why people who get something that seems incredulous go to the site and check it out and make sure there's not a scam either.
Mhm.
But even more so, then that's where you can kind of derive some of your questions. But at least you have an idea what to expect out of the process. When you don't tell people what to expect out of the process, you're you're not going to be trusted by a whole bunch of folks.
So I like what you said, because once again, I think it's not asking much out of life. If somebody is going to
It is.
allocate their time to say, no particular order, but number
Mhm.
one, hey, I need to know a little bit about the person to whom I'm going to be reporting. What's this
Right.
person like? What's their personality? Maybe even get a little taste of their, folder of like,
Hmm.
have any allegations levied against them? Have they made anything of bias or discrimination? Like,
Hmm.
what are I think that's not unreasonable if you're going to
No.
work for somebody to get a
No.
peek at it. Then also to find out, is this person like hard to work with? Now you could still maybe take it because they feel like I could deal with it and this is a good job and I'll make a lot of money, but at least they have their eyes open. Well, similarly, like you were referring to, if you're going to ask someone to do work, shouldn't you tell that beforehand? and set
Yeah.
a pay range and say, hey, we really like you. We think you're good. We think you could do well here. We want to give you, in the instance you mentioned, Mark, some sourcing candidates, but we're going to pay you in advance for your time. Would you want to do it? Then that seems fair. Like, okay, the person can say thanks, but no thanks, or, oh,
You
okay.
froze. Okay.
If, if you're going to pay, and if you're going to pay me and I'm going to source it, okay, I'll spend some time doing it. Let's see how it
Mhm.
works.
Well, yeah, it seems like it's very popular to gamify
Mhm.
the hiring process because that's what it is. But really, why should it be your guess as good as mine?
Mhm.
Always, you're trying to guess what I'm trying. They're trying to get and not trying to waste your time. I get that point, but also the candidate deserves to have his time respected as well and have their efforts expected. Tell them up front they're going to spend extra time, that the hiring process extends out an additional 4 days for you to perform this task for us, and you'll be, hiring will be contingent on that. Tell them up front. What is there to lose? And in fact, you probably get more people of the ilk you want
Mhm.
in order for you to not waste time. But otherwise, even if somebody goes through that, they're going to have ill feelings because they're looking for the other shoe to drop once they do get hired. Because it was already, one thing that they were kind of lured into after they interviewed. So it's not just going to be, oh, you're forgiven because you hired me. No, I'm looking for some other signs too. I just want to see how this is going to play out, but they're willing to get paid for that. And that's where everybody loses.
Mhm.
Everybody. There are no winners in that.
I don't know if we talked, I think we may have talked about this before. How great would it be if you actually had to pay a candidate to interview? Because if you would pay a candidate to interview, I'd imagine instead of having 10 interviews over 6 months, they would probably have 2 interviews in one day just to get it done. Like, do you recall Spotify made a new rule? So if they want to have a meeting, they put a budget on how much this meeting costs. And I
Right.
guess that division might have to eat that cost if you have these, conference meetings. With the idea is like basically saying you don't have to have meetings to have a meeting, to have a debriefing after the meeting. It's a waste of time.
Right.
So
Right.
wouldn't
Yeah.
something like that make sense too?
Well, during the pandemic, there were companies that started out paying folks, and I imagine there's some that still might be paying people to interview. But yeah, they paid them for projects and for their
Mhm.
time that they spent. And maybe it wasn't much, but for the
Mhm.
fact that they respected the candidate's time and they don't choose that particular candidate, leaves a better taste in their mouth than having to waste that time and being ghosted, or even having lured them into saying, well, you're a final candidate and never hearing from them again. I mean, any scenario might be better than just leaving people, leaving the bride at the altar, so to speak. I think that people need to realize, and I think that more of us need to realize, if we having people come back to the office, you're doing all these things that make them come back, and then you're kind of, they're spending all this time so that you can be sure that you're hiring the right person. That kind of says a lot if you're not willing to at least acknowledge and thank them for the time, or to pay them for the time, and even pay them at the rate for interviewing, because their time is very valuable and it's very tough here. And it's always kind of tough to job search, no matter what economy you're in. But it's real, and I know there's some recruiters, or some of you all watching. You can tell that some of your friends have spent 6 months to a year looking for a job since they've been laid off in this particular climate, and that's not particularly a good thing.
So I see where you're going. in terms of like the long-term unemployment. But before we
Yeah.
hit there, I just want to go
Okay.
back to what you mentioned about remote work. What do you think? Do you think it's fair where you had all these companies saying, okay, we're remote. Year goes by, 2 years go by, 2+ years go by. Now, all of a sudden, they're like, nope, you got to get back into the office. But in the meantime, they moved their family to a lower cost location.
Hmm.
They went to, schools there and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And now they're getting angry threats like with Amazon and Meta, kind of these subtle or not so subtle. Hey, if you don't come in
Yeah.
at least 3 days a week,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens to you. And that's a
Yeah.
little scary threat. So is that a
What?
lie that they told
Well,
about the remote,
if
or
you
like, what is
told,
that?
and it goes back to the first thing we talked about. If you told them up front that this was going to be temporary, that when we open office, you're expected in.
Mhm.
Many people were not. In fact, they were given the idea that this was going to be permanent, thus
Yes.
them moving. That's where we cross hairs. And then all these people cheering them on. Yeah, you need to do what the boss says. But that's not your life that people are talking about, because people have moved in with their parents to help their parents and to live, and
Mhm.
the elderly parents to live, or maybe they moved because they've moved closer to get better health care,
Mhm.
or they may have moved because the economics was better in one city than another. Instead, it can't be all about the company, and it shouldn't be about the company, and that filters into many different other discussions. But all in all, to say that, tell people up front what you really want to do. It looks more confusing that you are just making things up to go along as a company. And I understand that, again, you're going to have people try to defend companies and recruiters out there that would defend, well, this is how it really goes, and this is what people shouldn't have expected. No, no, no. A lie is a lie. That's what it is. Let's just call it that.
And you started talking about with people who are in between roles. Like, what are you seeing in
Hmm.
terms of people who have been out of work, particularly like these mid-level managers and senior managers? Because the blue collar workers and frontline workers, by all accounts, they seem to be doing pretty well. Like UPS folks are getting paid 170,000,
Hmm.
clearly with everything thrown in. It's not just
Right,
salary, everything thrown in.
right, right.
And a bunch of other places are starting to maybe have strikes and forming unions. So there's a big change, but the white collar workers, it's not so great, and I'll be frank, as a
No,
recruiter, it's slow. And speaking to other
yeah,
recruiters, it's pretty slow going and it's a little scary. And then if you're in between jobs, you could be out of work for a long period of time,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Don't, I think the people don't, here it is. When you're in a job search in this climate, particularly, and I think it's been that way for years. And I
Mhm.
had one of my favorite mentors tell me this years ago. She told me, said people should look to see how their skills fit in many different industries and not just one. So, I think what it get excluded many times is the manufacturing industry, the sustainable or the green industries, and maybe some of the other financial industries where they need other positions other than just like tech, for instance. That's an easy example. This tech needed in every single industry, but not everybody wants to go to those industries because they
Mhm.
don't pay as much as the big tech houses like the Googles and the Microsoft.
Yeah.
Very few people in a large spectrum of things. This is a small percentage of jobs, even though they might have 100,000, or maybe like an Amazon who might
Mhm.
have maybe 1 million employees by now. It's still small. Look at all the industries. So I think that's one thing that people can do. did you exhaust every industry possible, even if you might consider it maybe a pit stop for your skills to either enhance it or to continue to hone them, and then maybe shift when the market shifts. Having said that, yeah, it's a long haul for a lot of people, and I think for a lot of industries, this might be one. If it's almost 4 out of 10 who are lying to candidates, that might be a good
Uh,
reason why we have a certain chunk of unemployment and maybe even underemployment.
yeah, it's a little frightening because you have a confluence of events where you have a slowdown because high inflation, high interest rates, you know, these, like you said, tech companies and Wall Street
Yeah.
companies used to get money pretty much for free. So they were able
Hmm.
to just lavish and hire at will. Now it's
Right.
just the opposite. It's like Mark Zuckerberg was saying, it's a year of austerity, cost cutting. So you
Hmm.
tighten the belts. So when that happens, you it's a little chill effect because now if
Yeah.
you're in between jobs, you're like, oh no. And another thing I'm noticing going on with companies is they're hoarding talent. So they realized
Hmm.
during the Great Resignation, it's a big pain in the butt to constantly be recruiting and paying for recruiter fees and to onboard people, train them. It's
Yeah.
easier. Let's just play the team we have. Let's just keep them, even if they're not all A players, even if there are a lot of B's and C pluses. You know what? It's easier just to hold on to them. So now they're holding on to people. It's a slow market. The hiring takes forever, and there's still the layoffs subsided, but there's still, you see still layoffs here and there. So, what would you suggest to people in addition to like trying to pivot to other industries to just keep sane? Because a big thing is we've talked about in the past is your mental outlook. So, like, how do you keep from just losing it when month
Yeah.
after month you're not working?
Yeah. There are several things I think people can do, but I think to even add context to what you, because
Mhm.
we know that there was that Fortune uh, article a few months, it may have been a year ago even, where we saw that, there are job postings that stayed out longer than the actual deadline was. So, they're still recruiting even after they've hired for several months. You remember that? Because we've talked
Yeah.
about that. And that's part of that. Yeah, we want to kind of we want to keep the pipeline kind of thing, but it still goes back to lies. So what can candidates do? What can candidates do, or what can job seekers do to kind of make things a little bit better? One, it goes back to my mantra: job search is a lifestyle. Is something that people need to continually look for a job, and for them to hoard the potential of opportunities that they have. I know that might be hindsight, but that's something that I've been saying for 3 years,
Mhm.
and I think a number of people have been saying that for a number of years now. The second thing is, again, exhaust your potential for opportunities, even if it's a stepping stone. Look for contracts. Look for potentially, in some instances, where there might be some apprenticeships
Mhm.
and some internships. Now, maybe that won't speak to some of the mid-careerists who might be in the mid-management tiers, but it might be some of you that just graduated from college or just finished some training. Maybe you consider doing your apprenticeship through certain programs through the city and through the government, and they do pay while you're looking. So that's a possibility if you're in that situation. For everybody else in the middle, look for those contracts and look for those opportunities where, if they are one off, at least they are keeping your skills somewhat fresh. And volunteer is not a bad option. In some cases, you might be able to do both, where there's an apprenticeship with one aspect, but if you're honing a new skill and you're honing some things in the future, perhaps you can go and volunteer at an organization to use those skills and maybe work on a project, and maybe in return, maybe you can use as real volunteer in the sense that maybe they're not paying you, but they can pay you back with a reference, or some kind of just proof that you did a great job for them. And that way you can keep things going. Continue to exhaust your friends and family to see if they know people and get introductions. And maybe you might be able to find positions that are not even posted yet that might be imminent, that might be coming along down the pipeline. Get involved with your association and organizations where you have a membership. A lot of people don't get into to some of the minutia of those organizations where they volunteer on committees where you have a lot more intimate contact with people, where you can get to know people who are just like you, and that if they're announcing before anybody else, which happens, and I've seen it happen, where they say, hey, I'm about to leave this position to go to another company, and they say, oh, that means that position is about to be open. You might be able to get the inside scoop on it and maneuver in such a way where you could be seriously you might be a serious candidate for that position. So there's several tiers to that and several layers depending where you are. Of course, we're not speaking to everybody because a lot of times we have people who've been in leadership for a long time who might be near the career and they need to make another move. I would say go ahead and continue to lean into those moves, but consider maybe not the internships and the apprentices, but maybe for the fact that you volunteer and that you're keeping close tabs with your organizations that you're a part of, your former coworkers and people who are still making moves along those lines.
That's great advice, because I'm a big believer in like an object in motion stays in motion. So like if you're
Yeah.
doing all these things you're talking about, you're
Yes.
meeting people, you're making new contacts, you're getting out of the house,
Yeah.
like, so you're doing something that increase your chances of something else happening. Whereas if you just say, and I'm not disparaging anybody who's in between roles for a long period of time, instead of being
Uh-huh.
home and just like, woe is me, oh, this is terrible, and feeling bad about yourself. Yeah, you want to self-heal, you want to like take care of yourself. But to Mark's advice, I think and I agree with him so much, you want to get out there and do stuff, because at least
Yeah.
it increases your chances of making something happening, as opposed to just,
Increases your visibility,
yeah,
it increases your networking potential.
yeah,
But I would even say too, don't leave also the possibilities, and this is more of the long shot, is start looking for ways where you can collaborate with other professionals who are like you. Those associations and industry organizations are great because they're all a lot of them are doing projects or doing something to enhance. Maybe you can lend your voice to those things, and that gives you visibility. More people you're able to contact and let you know that that you need an opportunity, it increases your chances of getting hired, even if it's just a passive opportunity. So don't leave those kind of things out where you're volunteering to do something a little extra to help the industry and help other people at large, but it is something that will get more eyes on your needs as well.
yeah. Can we circle back to the kind of the lie? Because when you mentioned about the
Yes.
job posting staying on there, it reminded me of something.
Yeah.
So what Mark was talking about before that, a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll put out job postings on their own site, on Indeed, on all sorts of other places. And
Hmm.
they use as a pipeline. They use it to see, who's open for it. Maybe they interview a few people to pick their brains and see how much they're paying and how much we should pay.
Right.
But, and I don't know if I want to call this a lie or an omission or what, but on the bigger scale, because it made me think. Well, I was, watching CNN, CNBC, and Bloomberg, and they were talking about the JOLTS report. Now, I don't want to get wonky. The
Mhm.
JOLTS report basically is how many jobs are posted. And the theory
Right.
is there's a lot of jobs being posted, that shows that the economy is good because companies are posting
Mhm.
jobs, so they're confident. But you and I know, and career coaches and resume writers and recruiters know that, well, that's not always accurate. People put up
Right.
jobs not only when they need to hire, but they leave it on there. They forget to take it off. Um, they put multiple jobs that are just tweaked differently because it may
Hmm.
attract somebody.
Right.
And so what ends up happening when the government counts those jobs, they count it as like this is sacrosanct, this is like exact, but no
Right.
one ever bothers to say, wait a minute, are these duplicates? Think about it. Someone posts a job, usually it might be posted on Indeed and 20 other sites. So it's the same job
Right.
all over the place, but they're just counting those jobs. So it gives a false reality of really what's out there. And this time around, a lot of the economists and Wall Street folks on cable news, oh my
Mhm.
God, there's so many less jobs being posted. And I'm like yelling at the TV. Well, of course, it's August. August historically is slow.
Yep.
Companies really aren't going to spend the money to post jobs in the last few weeks of August because they know nothing's going to happen, but they're going to
Right.
post it probably in September. Now, to worry if in September and October they post it and nothing happens, that's scary, or they don't post it. Then that's a
Right.
concern. Then check this,
Right.
not to go too inside baseball, but then you have something with the jobs report, right? Where it's the
Right.
household survey, where they'll call up households to say, hey, Mark, hey, Jack, have you worked this week? And those numbers can't be right because
Right.
first of all, how many people have a landline that can pick up? Second, who's going to pick up some rando who's saying, hey, Mark, hey, Jack, can you tell me about your work? Can you give me your
Mhm.
security number? Can you tell me how much money that you earned this week? You'd be like, get lost, hang up. So
Right.
I wonder, how are they coming up with those numbers? Are they accurate, or this is like a big lie that they just making up numbers? And there's another one, Mark, the birth death
Yeah.
model.
You wonder how they want those jobs, and what the source of this something from. Say that
There's
again.
also there's also something called the birth death model. So they
Right.
say they
Okay.
just have a model where they
Right.
just extrapolate and say, oh, so many new business started. And if so many new business started, here's how many people they employ. But it's not
Right.
based on any real people. It's just a model. So
Right.
so we're talking about on one side, the beginning of the conversation is about like, hiring managers, but this is on a big scale, like how we
Right.
judge the economy. And those metrics are really funky. They're not so accurate.
I
Which
agree.
so are they lying, or are they just like, what would you even call that?
Well, I think if you don't know if the problem exists,
Yeah.
then I don't think it would be a lie. But I think if you know um, there are anomalies, then it's deceit.
Dude, if a
I would,
knucklehead like me living in New Jersey, some random guy, right? Some average
yeah,
guy, if I spotted that, how can these other people in high ranking government not know what's going on?
yeah. Well, it unfortunately it's been that way for many, many, many years. And it's one of those constant things where it becomes more noticeable when the unemployment's lower than when it's higher, right? Because when it's higher, and we know that there's a lot of people speaking to the mass unemployment that we were a few years back when it was 14%. Remember that?
Mm.
Then yeah, people stop counting. But when it's low, and yet you hear other people's experience like we never heard before, I don't think, like we do on LinkedIn and on Twitter, you can't help but to wonder that yeah, there's just this information is very diluted. So, I don't know if there's anything particular that people could do about it, but to really be sensibly aware about the potential for opportunities and where the market is. I would say narrow it down to your industry and try to find out what is the real deal in my industry.
Mm.
A lot of people don't
Yeah.
have industries. They're just looking for any job. Can't fault people for that, but at the same time, you and I know the narrower your search, the better it is. Because you can't find, like in your industry, you can't find compliance in every industry.
Mhm.
It's only very few that would apply to. So, you know, I think if people were just a little bit more focused, I think it'll be better for them. But at the same time, yeah, they're lies. We can't
So
reshape a we can't
yeah,
reshape a
yeah,
white lie. It's just a lie. It may be a lie that we all accept and everybody kind of knows that it is, but I think we won't say every entity is purposely doing that, but we know there are a lot of things that just get swept under the rug to give the illusion that the room is clean.
does it break down to this, Mark? At the end of the day, it's just caveat emptor. Like everybody just has to be very careful, has to do their due diligence, have to do their homework, can't just depend on someone saying, trust me, you're going to get that bonus. Don't worry about it. Where you just have
Yeah,
to
yeah, you
really,
can.
yeah.
DTA, don't trust anyone when it comes to your livelihood.
Yeah.
But it- you got to trust some people. And I think, too, we can't undervalue, as well as we experience all the time, community. It's just being part of a community that is that they're having those kind of discussions where they're being helpful to one another. And I don't want to make it a kumbaya moment, but they do exist. You either got to create it or find it. And it really does help when you don't look for jobs alone, which a lot of people are
Mhm.
saying that really helps them. That when they
Yeah.
have a lot of support, it makes a big difference in their efforts and their ability to be resilient versus all the lies that we're being told and shown on a daily basis.
Well, before we head out, any
Mhm.
last words of encouragement to job seekers, people who are trying to advance their careers, or any other insights that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think people should look at, and I was looking at this morning, and this will just take a minute here. It talks about Elie Wiesel. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was an assistant to the president. He wrote the book The Night that won a Pulitzer Prize back in the 80s. He tells this story on the White House lawn. I think it was called The Perils of Indifference. And really, the whole idea is that, um, midst of making really crucial decisions, your destiny is in your hands, and it is about creating opportunities for the most part. And creating opportunities, by that I mean, yeah, we could talk about creating jobs, but really creating a conversation around what you want to do and how you want to do it makes a difference. The more conversations you create and more eyes you get in front of, the more people that know, really does create a better chance for you to get found or to find an opportunity. So we can't dismiss the idea, and I try to avoid the word networking, but the connection with people is really important for now and for the rest of your life,
Mhm.
really, at least to some degree that you.
All right. I don't know. I think Mark faded out there. Chris, do you hear him? Is it me that faded out here?
Yeah, I think we lost Mark.
so so now he's referencing Eli Wiesel, I guess, relative to the Holocaust, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a very deep subject. It's hard to pivot out of that one to something more. It's a hard segue. So the segue is, I guess, to wrap it up, is that for whether you call it a lie, omission, white lie, whatever it may be, I think for people who are looking for a job, who are looking to advance their career, they really have to keep their eyes open, they have to question everything. I hate to say that because you want to be able to trust what someone says they're going to do, but you have to be careful and you have to do your homework and before you enter it's into anything. And when someone says something that's too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true. So just be careful and just make sure that before you accept anything, that everything is signed. You have to get it in that offer letter. And if they tell you, no, don't worry about it, be okay, worry about it. Because if it's not in writing, they'll forget about it and you're skunked. On the positive side too, what I would say is this: we're in a challenging time, but we'll get through it. So if you're in between jobs, I don't want to be cavalier about it, but it's not just you. There's a lot of people going through the same thing, and we'll get better. It's just going to be a little rocky road, so that hang tough, keep doing what you're doing, and eventually you'll find the right opportunity. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I'm sorry that Mark kind of seems like we cut out. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And thank you so much for watching the show. Hit me up if you have any questions, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover. So thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.